Once upon a time, there was a sweet little girl known to everyone as Little Red Riding Hood because of the red cloak her grandmother had given her. One day, her mother asked her to take a basket of food to her grandmother, who was feeling ill. Little Red Riding Hood happily agreed and set off through the forest. Before she left, her mother warned her to stay on the path and not talk to strangers. As she skipped along, picking flowers and marveling at the beauty around her, she didn't notice the cunning wolf watching her from behind a tree. The wolf, always looking for a meal, approached Little Red Riding Hood under the guise of a friendly stranger. "Where are you going, little girl?" he asked, trying to sound kind. "I'm going to my grandmother's house to bring her some food," she replied innocently. Seeking to take advantage of the situation, the wolf tricked her into revealing the location of her grandmother's house. "Why don't you pick some more flowers for your grandmother?" suggested the wolf, pointing to a patch off the path. Oblivious to his true intentions, Little Red Riding Hood wandered away to gather more flowers, while the wolf took a shortcut to her grandmother's house. When he arrived, the wolf knocked on the door and, disguising his voice, called out, "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some food." Thinking it was her granddaughter, the grandmother opened the door. The wolf leapt inside and gobbled her up in one big bite. He then dressed in her clothes and climbed into her bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. Shortly after, Little Red Riding Hood finally arrived at her grandmother's house, a little out of breath from her flower-picking adventure. She knocked on the door and entered when she heard a raspy voice telling her to come in. Inside, the house seemed different and darker. She approached the bed, noticing how odd her grandmother looked. "Grandmother, what big ears you have!" she exclaimed. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf, trying to suppress a chuckle. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have! All the better to see you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big teeth you have! All the better to eat you with." And with that, the wolf jumped out of bed and lunged at Little Red Riding Hood. But a nearby woodsman, who had heard the commotion, burst into the house just in time. He struck the wolf down and freed the grandmother, who was miraculously still alive in the wolf's belly. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother thanked the brave woodsman. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood promised to always stay on the path and never talk to strangers. And they all lived happily ever after.